Hi. I have a bit of a similar question, actually. I know one of the ways in which the Bible is appreciated, even by some of its harshest critics and deeply atheistic people, is as a work of literature and is something, at least the King James or the authorized translation of the Bible is something very aesthetically beautiful and a great work of literature and a great work of poetry. And I'm wondering, just from your study of it and from your personal perspective, if there's any particular passages or parts of it that you find particularly have struck you in that way, or that you cherish more than any others that you'd be able to share? Or
well, the ones that have really opened up to me, I think, are the stories in Genesis, right up to the Tower of Babel, because I think, well, and hopefully I'll be able to talk to all of you about that, but I think I've got some sense of what they mean and why. I mean, I know it's not exhaustive, and obviously, but like, and then the story in Exodus as well, I also feel that like I've got a handle on that, and so those have hit me really, really hard. And that, you know, I mean, just trying to understand this first part of Genesis, to try to understand what these concepts mean, has been, especially when I started to understand that the concept that human beings are made in God's image, that God has all those attributes that we just described, that human beings are made in God's image, that's actually the cornerstone of our legal system. That really rattled me, because I didn't understand that clearly, that our body of laws has that metaphysical presupposition without which the laws fall apart. And that's starting to happen. It really is, you know, like the postmodern critique of law. The law schools are, I would say, they're overrun by postmodernists who are undermining the structure of Western law as fast as they possibly can, because they don't buy any of this. And so they're much more likely to just think of the law as something like a casual, pragmatic tool to be manipulated for the purposes of bringing forth the utopia. It's a really, really, really bad idea. So it's very strange to me that we go off track when that metaphysical foundation starts to get rattled. And so
do you think your appreciation of the aesthetic beauty of it comes from a belief in like the truth of the underlying propositions? I mean, it's because like even the atheistic critics I'm thinking of, like even Dawkins or
yeah.
Hitchens, really appreciate the Bible as just a piece of really beautiful literature, and I guess the quality of the writing and the sort of exalted themes behind it, even if they totally reject the underlying premises of it. But you seem to
I don't think that you can see it as beautiful and poetic and reject the underlying premises, because if you see it as beautiful and poetic, you're accepting the underlying premises with your experience of the beauty and the poetics, even though you may be fighting it with your articulated rationality. So I think all that indicates is a disintegrated perspective on the book. And it's not surprising that that's the case. I mean, it's the perspective that everyone has on the book, except with them it's more well-developed and well thought through. But I think it's fundamentally, they're not approaching the thing with enough respect. That's my sense, is that, and who knows, right? Because I don't know, but what I've tried to do is to think, there's probably more to this than I know. And then try to understand it from that perspective, rather than to think, for example, well, it's a collection of superstitions that we've somehow outgrown. It's like, no, it's just, sorry, that's not a deep enough analysis, because it's got some truth, but it doesn't take into account the fact that the propositions still stand at the foundation of our culture. It doesn't address Nietzsche's central concern, which is that if you blow out the notion of God, the entire structure crumbles. You know, and you can debate that, fine. But I'd, you know, just assume that you debated it with Nietzsche, because he's a pretty tough customer to tangle with. So, and I don't think the atheist types, insofar as there's a type, I don't think they've wrestled with the real problems. So, yeah.
So I appreciate you set out some ground rules, keep things rational, and I think that's going to help us. What I'm wondering is, so for instance, you had said elsewhere, the New Testament, from what you can see, it's psychologically correct, and that's, you know, quite astounding, I would say. There's a lot of truth, and in your depictions of these stories elsewhere, you've pointed out like deep truths, you know, real powerful. So what my question would be is, if we can say Nietzsche took a like an order of magnitude of intelligence and depth to be able to predict what would happen in the next century. Rationally, if the Bible's not the inerrant Word of God, what's going on?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I mean, I'm going to try to answer that rationally, and as we move forward. But as I said, I don't want to leave people with the notion, because in some ways, this is something I've thought about. What I've been thinking about for a long time is I can't tell if I'm like an advocate of the religious viewpoint or its worst possible critic, because I am doing my best to make it rational, and there's a reductionistic element to that. But I think that I'm doing that while also leaving the door open to things that I don't understand, because I know that there's more to this story than I understand or can understand. And I'm laying out what I can understand, and I'm making it rational. But I do not believe for an instant that exhausts the realm. It's like there are ways of interpreting these stories that work in the conceptual universe we inhabit right now. But there's a lot of things that we don't understand. And one thing I've found about digging into these stories is that the deeper you dig, the more you find. And that's that's one of the things that convinced me that there was more to them than I had originally suspected, because things would click and I'd think, wow, that's really something. And then I would take it apart further and I'd think, oh, well, I thought that was something, but this is even more remarkable. It just keeps opening and opening. And so I'm going to make it rational. I'm going to try to provide an answer to, and it is, I think you're right about speaking about Nietzsche and his capacity for prophecy, and Dostoevsky's in the same category. It's like there are prophetic elements to the Old and New Testament that seem to stretch over much vaster spans of time. And I'm going to try to produce a rational account of that. But I mean, one of the reasons that I think the New Testament is psychologically true, let's say, is because, and this is one of the things that's deeply embedded in the structure of the Bible. In the Old Testament, there's this idea, and I'm skipping ahead, that through a succession of states, the people who behave properly will eventually establish the proper state. And so the state is viewed in some sense as the entity of salvation. But what happens in the New Testament is that idea gets, you could say, deconstructed. And instead of a state being the place of redemption, a state of being becomes the state of redemption. And so the idea that human beings will be redeemed moves from the utopian state vision to the responsibility of the individual. And I think that's correct. I mean, I believe that that's the right answer. And I think that the West in particular is predicated on that idea because it makes the state subservient to the individual. I mean, there's a dialogue, a continual dialogue, but in the final analysis, the locus of the divine is the individual, not the state. And I believe that that's so true that if we don't act it out and believe it, then we all die painfully. And that's true enough for me. So, yeah.
Thank you for watching this video. This is the Archangel 911. If you enjoyed what you were watching, please click that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and leave a comment below. Have a nice day.